Don't make this into a thing, she said, leaving our anniversary dinner at 11 p.m. to watch a movie at her best friend's place. She didn't know I sent back the proposal ring the next morning and quietly terminated our lease while she stayed out. 4 weeks later, after that same friend brutally ignored her, at a bar, she came begging under the rain, "You were supposed to fight for me." I stood in front of the elevator and replied with just one sentence. "I'm Alex, 28. I work as an architectural drafter. It's the kind of job where you measure twice and cut once, where precision isn't optional and cutting corners shows up in the final product eventually. I think that way about most things in my life. Not just work. I don't take shortcuts on things that matter to me. I'm not flashy, not particularly exciting, but when I'm in on something, I'm all the way in." Sarah is 26, freelance marketing. She's good at her job, good at image, good at energy, good at reading a room and knowing exactly what people want to see. We'd been together 3 years, living together for 14 months. The apartment was hers originally. I moved in after we'd been dating about 1.5 years and it made sense. Jake was her college best friend. He'd been in the picture the whole time I'd known her, and I want to be fair about that. He was part of her life before I was in it, and I tried to respect that from the start. I told myself that being supportive of her friendships was what a good partner did. But Jake was always just there. At a birthday dinner I'd thought was just the two of us, until I looked up and saw him walk in. Sarah hadn't mentioned inviting him, and watched her face change in a way I hadn't seen in a while. In the text she'd answer mid-conversation, phone tilted slightly away from me. On our Asheville trip, where she spent an entire afternoon on the hotel balcony while I walked around the town alone, and when I came back, she said she'd lost track of time. I said it was fine. I made it a habit of saying things were fine. I want to be clear that I'm not telling this story to make Jake out to be a villain. I don't think he was scheming anything. I think he liked having Sarah's attention and didn't think too hard about what it cost anyone else. Some people are like that, not malicious, just not particularly considerate of what's happening outside their own frame. The problem wasn't Jake, really. The problem was what Sarah chose every time she had to choose. What she didn't know, what I hadn't told anyone, was that I'd spent 6 weeks planning that anniversary. The dinner reservation. A gift she'd mentioned once, offhandedly, 7 months earlier, that I'd tracked down and wrapped without saying anything. And a ring I'd bought after 3 years of deciding this was the person I wanted to build a life with. I'd been carrying it in my jacket pocket for 9 days, waiting for the moment that felt right. I was going to propose that night. That was the sequel I'd been building toward. She left at 11 p.m. to go watch a movie with Jake. The evening had actually been good. That's the part that still gets me when I think about it. The restaurant was quiet, the food was right, and the conversation felt easy in a way it used to more often. Around 10:30, I noticed her phone starting to light up on the table. She glanced at it a couple of times. I didn't say anything. I was thinking about what I wanted to say when I brought out the ring. I was thinking about how to start. Then she set down her glass, stood up, and said it. "Jake just texted. I'm going to his apartment to watch a movie." It took me a second. "Are you serious right now? He's my best friend." She was already reaching for her coat. "You've always been weird about Jake. Don't make this into a thing." I want to be precise about what happened, because I know how this sounds from the outside. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't grab her arm. I asked one question, and what I got back was a preemptive verdict. "You've always been weird about this. Don't make this into a thing." My reaction was framed as the problem before I'd even had one. She didn't wait to hear what I'd say. The door clicked behind her. I stood in the kitchen for a while. I took off my jacket and folded it over the back of a chair. I set the ring box on the kitchen table and looked at it. I didn't call anyone. Didn't pace around. Didn't throw anything. I just sat there and let myself think clearly for the first time in a while. I wasn't exactly angry. It was something quieter than anger. It was the feeling of something coming into focus that you'd been deliberately not looking at directly. She hadn't asked if it was okay. Hadn't said "I'll be quick" or "Is that all right?" She announced it like it was already decided, preemptively labeled my response as the issue, and left. And the more I sat with it, the more I realized she'd been doing versions of that for a long time. I sat in that kitchen and let myself actually look at the pattern. About 8 months in, I'd made a birthday dinner reservation for 2. Jake showed up anyway. Sarah had invited him without mentioning it to me. When I brought it up afterward, quietly, she said I needed to stop being threatened by her friendships. I let it go. The next 6 months, 3 Saturday morning plans canceled because Jake needed her. Something was always happening with him. She'd always go. I rescheduled twice, and then stopped scheduling things on Saturday mornings altogether without consciously deciding to. The Asheville trip. We'd planned it for 2 months. One afternoon, she sat on the hotel balcony for almost 3 hours, texting someone. I walked around the town by myself, found a good bookshop, had lunch at a place with outdoor seating, came back to the room, and she said she'd lost track of time. I said it was fine. I said that a lot. 2 weeks before the anniversary, I'd made a reservation at a restaurant she'd been wanting to try. She forgot about it. She was at Jake's apartment helping him brainstorm something for a client pitch. She apologized to me. She didn't cancel Jake. I absorbed all of it. Every time I filed something away as a separate incident. Gave her the benefit of the doubt. Told myself I was being the bigger person. Then, about 2 months before the anniversary, I finally said something. Not accusatory, I just told her directly that I kept feeling like I was being moved to second place when Jake was involved. That it wasn't one thing, it was a pattern. That it bothered me. She looked at me. "You're not seriously jealous of Jake," she said. "That's embarrassing for you." And the conversation was over. I didn't push back. Didn't bring it up again. I told myself I was being mature, that pushing the point would only create more friction, that she'd recognize it on her own eventually. The thing about being methodical is that it can work against you sometimes. You file things away cleanly, you wait for more information, you give the other person the benefit of the doubt until the weight of the evidence is undeniable. I thought that was wisdom. I think now it was just a way of not having to face something I already knew. Looking back, I think she took my silence as agreement. The anniversary was supposed to be the beginning of something. I had a ring. I had a speech in my head. I was going to ask her to build something real with me. Instead, I was sitting in an empty kitchen at midnight, finally letting myself count up the times she'd chosen something else. The number was higher than I'd admitted to myself. I had been giving this relationship full immersion. That had only ever been coming from one direction. She didn't come home that night. By 9 the next morning, I had 3 texts. Short ones: "We need to talk," "You're not responding," "I don't understand what's happening." I read them all. Didn't reply. Around noon, there was a voicemail. I saved it without listening to it yet. By that evening, I got a text from Priya, a mutual friend. Someone I'd always liked. Someone I'd always thought was pretty fair. "Hey, Sarah mentioned you two had a fight. She said you're being really harsh over a movie night. Just wanted to check in." Harsh over a movie night. I read that a few times. I understood then that a narrative was already moving, and it had a significant head start on me. I didn't respond to Priya. I just thought about what she'd written. Harsh over a movie night. That was the version being circulated. Not that Sarah had walked out of our anniversary dinner at 11 p.m. Not that I'd had a ring in my jacket pocket. Not that this was the latest in a pattern that went back 18 months. Just, Alex is being difficult about something small. A couple of days later, Dave mentioned casually, no agenda, just passing it along, that Jake had apparently said something to a few people in the extended friend group. Something about how Alex had always seemed tense about his friendship with Sarah. Like I had been the problem all along. Like the real story was about my inability to handle a normal friendship. I wasn't shocked, but I noticed the shape of it. Before I'd said a single word to anyone, the story had already been structured. I was jealous. I was controlling. I'd abandoned a relationship without cause or communication. Everyone around us was receiving a version of events that held together perfectly. If you didn't know what had been in my jacket pocket that night, if you didn't know about the 6 weeks of planning, if you didn't know that I'd raised this exact issue 2 months ago and been told it was embarrassing that I'd brought it up at all. I'm not someone who moves quickly when I'm upset. I think things through. I wait until I'm sure. So I let them keep building the story. I didn't call anyone to correct the record, didn't send Sarah a long message laying out the timeline, didn't reach out to Priya with context. I stayed quiet, and I went back through my phone. The first thing I went back to were the voicemails. There was more than one, as it turned out. I listened to them in order. Day 1. Morning. You're overreacting. It was a movie. Call me. Day 1. Evening. I don't understand why you're doing this. We talked about trust. This isn't who I thought you were. I set my phone down after that one. Then the next morning, another. Day 2. Morning. Do you remember our first anniversary? You made dinner from scratch. You told me I was the person you wanted to build something real with. Was that a lie? Because it feels like you're throwing that away over one night. I sat with that one for a while. The callback to something I'd said when I meant it, used now as leverage. The nostalgia bomb, delivered on schedule. Day 2. Evening. You're going to throw away 3 years over one night. That's on you. That's your decision. Day 3, late. You know what? You're pathetic. I was just watching a movie. Maybe you were never right for me. I listened to that last one twice. Pathetic. I thought about the story she was telling people. That I was being harsh. That I'd walked out over something trivial. That I was jealous and difficult and had refused to communicate. I thought about Priya's text and Jake's comment about me being tense. And then I thought about the progression of those voicemails. Day 1. Overreacting. Day 2. Nostalgia? Then that's on you. Day 3. Pathetic. Maybe you were never right for me. That's not someone who had an innocent night and is genuinely confused about why their partner is upset. The escalation from your overreacting to your pathetic across 72 hours told me exactly what she was protecting. It wasn't the relationship. It was the narrative. A few days later, Dave texted. Casual, like he communicates no dramatics, just passing something along. Hey, weird thing. Ran into Jake at O'Malley's last night. He was talking about Sarah kind of dismissively, like she's just someone he hangs out with sometimes. Didn't bring up any drama with you too. He seemed completely fine. Just thought you should know. Jake was fine. He'd always been fine. He didn't know what that movie night had cost, and it wouldn't have registered as significant if he had. The last thing I did that week was take the ring box off the kitchen table. I hadn't moved it since the night Sarah left. I picked it up, opened it once, then closed it. I photographed it with my phone box closed, the date visible in the corner of the screen. Then I drove to the jewelry store and returned it. The process took about 15 minutes. They were professional about it. I kept the receipt. When I got home, I folded it and put it in my wallet. I didn't tell anyone I'd done that. It wasn't a statement. It wasn't for an audience. I just needed to close the file. That night, I sent Sarah one text. I think we both know where this is going. I'm not going to argue about it. She called twice in the next hour. I let them go to voicemail. She left another message shorter, asking what that meant, asking me to call her back. I didn't. The next morning, I contacted our property management office and asked about early lease termination. I'd already looked up the terms the night before. There was a fee, a notice window, some paperwork. I told them I'd be in touch. I texted Dave and asked if I could stay with him for a while. He said yes without asking questions. That's Dave. He doesn't need the complete picture to understand when someone needs a hand. Over the following 2 days, I packed. Sarah was staying at someone else's place. I didn't ask whose. I packed methodically the things I'd brought into the apartment and a few things we'd acquired together that were clearly mine. I left everything else where it was. I wasn't making a point with what I took or what I left behind. I was just taking what was mine. I didn't post anything. Didn't reach out to mutual friends to give them the full story. Didn't forward the voicemails to anyone, not even Dave. Didn't mention the ring to anyone except enough context so Dave understood why I needed a place to stay. I know there's a version of this where I do all of that, where the voicemails go to the group chat, where I make sure everyone has the complete picture before I leave, where I engineer some kind of public accounting. I didn't want that. What I wanted was to stop spending energy on something that had been running at a deficit for longer than I'd been honest with myself about. Close the lease. Handle the paperwork. Put my attention somewhere that gave something back. The quieter I got, the louder her version of events became. AITA. About 4 weeks after I moved out, Dave called me. He and Mike had been at O'Malley's. Same bar, where Dave had run into Jake before. Sarah had shown up that evening looking around when she came in, Dave said, like she was searching for someone. When she spotted Jake, she walked over. Jake was with a group. He looked up when she came over, said hi, and introduced her to whoever was standing nearby. Then he turned back to his friends and the conversation he'd been in the middle of. Dave told me Sarah stood there for a few minutes. He used the phrase like she'd walked into the wrong room. After a little while, she left. Made a call from the parking lot. He could see her from inside. He described her as looking like she was crying. Jake ordered another round about 2 minutes after she left, Dave told me. I didn't say anything for a moment. Then I thanked him and got off the phone. The next morning there was a voicemail from a number I recognized. She'd called me from the parking lot. Her voice was different from the earlier messages. The earlier ones had architecture to them: guilt first, then nostalgia, then anger. This one didn't have any structure. She sounded like someone who had run out of things to try. I don't understand what's happening, she said. You were supposed to fight for this. I thought you would. I don't know. I don't know why you just left. Why is everyone leaving? I listened to it once. Saved it. Didn't reply. not to make a point, not to let her sit with it. There was just nothing left to say that would help either of us. About a week later, she showed up at my building. I came through the front doors and she was standing just inside the entrance, out of the rain. Her hair was damp at the edges. She'd been waiting. She started talking as soon as I saw her. She said Jake meant nothing. She said she loved me. She said she'd made a mistake, that she hadn't understood what she was walking away from, that she was sorry. She said she missed what we had. She said she'd been thinking about it for weeks. I listened to all of it. When she finished, I looked at her for a moment. I know, I said. She waited. Her expression was doing something I recognized. That's it. Not spoken yet, but working its way toward the surface. She was waiting for the door to crack open a little, for me to start the negotiation, for something that would let the conversation continue. Have a good night, Sarah. I turned toward the elevator. Is that all you're going to say? Her voice was quieter than I expected. I stopped, looked back at her. I said what was true, and I went inside. I've thought about that moment a lot since then. Not because I'm proud of how it looked. I wasn't performing composure, wasn't trying to land a line. I've thought about it because of how still I felt. Not cold, not distant, genuinely still. The kind of still that comes from having already made a decision, processed it completely, and not needing to revisit it. For a long time in that relationship, I'd been operating at full capacity inside something that wasn't meeting me in the middle. I kept thinking that if I planned more carefully, communicated better, was more patient, more generous, the other half would show up. That's not how it works. You can't draft a building on a foundation that isn't there. I don't know what she was expecting when she came to my building. Maybe a conversation. Maybe she expected me to be angrier, and anger would have been something she could engage with. Maybe she expected that if she said the right things in the right order, the story would start again from where she wanted it to. But I'd already read to the end. When the elevator doors opened, I got in. I didn't look back through the glass. I didn't hear from Sarah again after that night. The mutual friend group quieted the way they do when the situation has resolved itself and there's nothing new to circulate. About 2 weeks later, Priya texted, I didn't know about the ring. Dave told me. I'm really sorry, Alex. I replied, it's okay. I'm good. And I meant it. Jake, from what I heard through Dave, was completely unaffected. Gym photos. A work trip somewhere. His usual routine, unchanged. That movie night had cost him nothing, which was consistent with how much weight he'd given it in the first place. I threw myself into a residential complex project I'd been working on for months. A large one, the kind that requires total immersion. Hundreds of drawings. Dozens of revision cycles. Problems that compound if you're not fully present. Before I moved out, I'd been coming to it distracted, always processing something from home in the background, never entirely in the room. Working on it afterward was different. There was nothing pulling my attention sideways. I could sit with a problem for as long as it took. I could be fully where I was. I was proud of the work when it was finished. Not in a way that felt like contrast or compensation. Just cleanly proud, the way you feel when something you gave real attention to turns out the way it was supposed to. One evening, Dave and Mike came over to my new place. We cooked something straightforward, sat around, talked about nothing important. Someone was loosely planning a road trip. There was a bar on 5th that was supposed to do good wings. A movie Mike had seen that Dave hadn't gotten to yet. Ordinary. Genuinely good. A few weeks after that, I was getting ready to go somewhere unremarkable. I don't even remember where. Something routine, and I put on my jacket. I reached into the pocket out of habit. The ring receipt was still there. I took it out and looked at it for a moment. Small piece of paper. A date. A transaction number. I put it back in the pocket. I didn't feel cheated. Didn't feel vindicated. Didn't feel much of anything, actually, which turned out to be its own kind of answer. I felt quiet. The way you feel when a project that was never going to work out finally stops taking up space in your calendar and your head. The sequel I'd been planning turned out to be for a different story, and I think that's exactly the right ending.